Okay, guys, we tried it again. Welcome to live video. Is everyone getting the feed now? We just tried that old start, stop, reset to see how it's going. How are we doing, Talia? On technical difficulties? Worse?
Gave it a heart.
Okay, you getting it? Are we thumbs up? Okay. Yeah. This is going live. Woohoo! That's Thank you for living our life with us too. And letting us know. I appreciate your comments so much. So we're going to start this thing all over again. And that gave everyone, let's take a breath. The whole crew here, which is my son and my daughter and my other son, helping out. And so be sure and send us your comments as we go along. And I was thanking all of y'all for sending me your pictures. Oh, gosh, guys, y'all are doing such a good job. I literally am blown away. I'm so proud of you. So keep up the good work. Keep sharing your pictures. I'm getting them through all the different ways you're sending them. You can also tag @MakePaducah, and we can search it by hashtag as well if you're posting them, or you can tag us @MakePaducah if you post them to your own Facebook page. So we're searching that and looking for you too. In the meanwhile, we're going to get into watercolor. Ooh, I'm so excited. If you didn't see the homemade watercolor recipe on the Facebook page, just scroll down after the video's over and you can get that. It does take a few days to make, or really to cure. I'm going to show you mine right here. I used an ice cube tray. You can use anything, an egg carton, whatever you might have. And this is really a good solution. I'm trying to do all the art lessons using supplies you might have in your house. Occasionally I'll pull out something, but don't worry if you don't have it. Just join in anyway, draw with a pencil of paper, get the information, and continue on, and the next art lesson will be perfect. So, but if you want to know how to make the watercolors, it does take a couple days to dry, and I'm just going to hold this closer to Keaton. You can tell two of mine are still a little wet, and I made those, 72 hours ago. So, but what we're going to do is kind of understanding how watercolors work today. So I'm going to walk you through some of the processes. This is great no matter the age. If at any time your young ones get frustrated or they want to stay on what we've been doing, let them play. Let them explore. The more they use the medium or the paint, the more they understand it. So watercolor comes in three basic forms to use for painting. And that would be pans, which I'll show you these, or here's another example of pan watercolors, or these. So they're little pans of pigment that are set, and it can be activated at any time with water. It also comes in tubes, which you can squirt out and activate with water on a palette, and it also comes in liquid. This is a student grade and this is a professional grade liquid watercolor. So any of those that you have will work for what we're doing today. And we're just going to understand how watercolor works. Talia said there's a question.
Catherine would like to know if watercolor markers will work.
Well, watercolor markers won't work as well for what we're doing today, but the thing that works with watercolor markers is they can still be activated with water. So if you drew something, you can take a paintbrush with some water to them and get a little bit of that liquid to move. The other essential element is using watercolor paper. We don't necessarily if you don't have watercolor paper, you can use a heavier stock. And if all you have is like a lightweight computer paper, that's fine. Notice it'll get a little wrinkly today. And yes?
Ellie would like to know if acrylic paint will work for today.
Acrylic paint will work if you thin it very thinly, but it's not ideal. But you know what? We're all in this boat together using what we have at home. So jump in and thin it down and see if you can get it to work. It doesn't have the same properties as watercolor, but you can try it for the purpose of this lesson. So what we're going to do is I want you to get a piece of watercolor paper. Let me tell you a little bit more about watercolor paper. So watercolor paper can be bumpy, which is called cold press, or can be smooth, which is called hot press. So think of bumpy like goosebumps, or think of smooth like you ironed it smooth. It also comes in weight, like people weigh in pounds, watercolor weighs in pounds. The heavier the weight, the thicker the paper. That's an easy way to remember. I tend to like to work in 140 pound because that tends to hold a lot of water. But whatever you have today, go ahead and use. So we're going to do a little different format today. Keaton's going to tilt the camera for me. And so you won't see my head bouncing around, and but you hopefully can see everything on the watercolor. And what I want you to do before we get started, Keaton, I want you to take your paper, and I want you to have one paper ready for the demo first. It's going to be our first 3 steps. And then I want you to have a second paper that we're going to fold into thirds. Okay? So the way you do that is take your watercolor paper, fold 1/3 over, and then crease it. And then take your other watercolor paper, the other side, 1/3 over and crease it. We're going to use that for the second part. So first part, plain paper. Second part, fold it into thirds. Okay? Is everyone ready to go? We good? So angle it down, Keaton. And let me know if you can hear me okay when we do this change. And I'm going to get us going. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to understand how, let me get some paper open, paint open. We're going to understand how water works with your watercolor. So I want you to get your brush, get some water, and I want you to activate one of your pans of color. So you're going to put water on it, and you're going to get it nice and wet. Do you see how wet I have that? I can add a little more water. And then what I want you to do is I want you to make marks and watch how it gets lighter as we move down the paper. Can everyone try that? See what happens with that? So more pigment and less pigment. So let's try that again with a different color. And for that, I want you to get it nice and wet. And then we're going to put it on here. Let's get that nice and see, we've got our nice spot there. Then dip it in a little water. And I want you to see what happens as just even more water comes into that as we make those marks. This is good to understand that as you add more water, it gets lighter and lighter. Now we're going to try and do that all together. Let's start with our red again. And instead of making separate spaces, we're going to put those all together. So let's, as we get out, and add a little water. How are we doing, guys? See how we get paler and paler to the end? Oh, Talia says there's a question.
What brush size do you recommend for these?
So normally I use a little bit larger brush size for these. I tend to use what is called a flat brush. So a flat brush is not necessarily flat because it's right here. It's flat because it's crimped flat. But you can use whatever you have. If you have a round or a smaller, if you have a larger, if all you have is a foam brush, you use whatever you have. The purpose doesn't matter too much on the brush. It's more to show us how the gradient works as we move it out. So are we ready to try again? We're going to try it with your second color. I'm going to move that water around. And we're going to take it out to the end. How's everyone doing? I'm going to add a little water and keep extending it. So, is everyone kind of seeing how the more you add water to it, the more transparent it will be? The other thing you can do is, this is going to be hard to see on the camera, but we're going to use just plain water and we're going to paint a little heart. So just water. It's going to be really hard to see on the camera, but you're going to see it in just a minute. when I do this. You see it? You see how the pigment will only go where the water is. And you can keep adding to it. You can add more pigment. Let it go to those edges. Now that's a lot of water on there. Probably more than I would normally use, but great for a demo so you can really see what's in there. Wherever you put the water down, the paint will stay within those water borders as long as it's laying flat. So let's try that on a bigger scale, and this is what is called wet on wet blending. So we're going to use our water to make a rectangle. This is going to be hard to see on the camera. What I want is I want the surface of the paper shiny, but I don't want to see water standing on it. So you want it to be shiny so you know it's wet. And then I'm going to start at one end, and I'm going to start at the other end, and I'm going to move in. Now notice I go back and forth like this. Oh, Talia says there's a question.
If your paper gets too wet during this, what do you suggest to help it?
So if your paper gets too wet, what you can do is take a paper towel. Don't use toilet paper. This is a funny one. Your toilet paper will actually leave little crumbs, and plus toilet paper seems to be a hot commodity these days. But use a paper towel, and actually, Keaton, can you run and grab a paper towel? I forgot to set one out on my station. If you use a paper towel, you can just blot it. The other thing you can do, if your paper gets too wet, and this is the hard thing about watercolor, is you can wait and let it dry. Oh my goodness, it's so hard because you want to have a lot of patience, but sometimes, if you're like me, I want to get it done right then. So you can just end up, so Keaton's just brought me some watercolor. Some watercolors. Keaton just brought me some paper towels. So if I take the paper towels, and I'll just do it on half so you can see, I'm just going to blot that. You'll see how much comes up. So this is a technique you can use if you get too much of water, too much paint, if you want to end up adjusting that. So you can blot it. But again, when you're putting the water down, you want it where the surface is shiny, but you can't see water sitting on it. So that way you can fill the background. Lots of people will use this for what in watercolor they call a wash. Normally when you think of washing, you think of scrubbing something clean. When you think of washing in watercolor, you think of covering a surface. So instead of removing, like you would if you were washing dishes or washing something to get clean, a wash in watercolor is actually to cover the surface. So are you feeling like we might want to start playing even more? Is everyone good? Okay. This shape one is really fun with the young ones right now. If you want to sit there and let them make shapes and even drop it in, let them make a circle. There's a little green on my brush, and then drop in colors. It literally can be the most mesmerizing thing. What's kind of fun too is as long as they don't move it too much, you can move the paint around. You see how it'll stay in that circle? I hope, is it clear enough for y'all to see that? That literally could entertain me for hours. So, okay, we've got gradients, we've got moving into transparency, we've got filling color shapes, and we've got wet on wet. Y'all are already halfway through into being awesome watercolor artists. So I'm going to move this over to the side. If anybody needs to see it again, let Talia or Keaton know. And we're going to grab our paper that we folded into thirds. So see how we just folded that into thirds, just where it folds over? And the purpose of this is we're going to divide our areas. Now, if you have here, what I need you to have handy is some rice. So any kind of rice will work. I just happen to have some minute rice. And you just need a pinch, some salt, You can use any salt. I happen to, in the studio, we use salt all the time for all sorts of things, because you can use it in making doughs and making recipes for art projects, and you can also use it in watercolor. So I have kosher salt, I have a plain salt, I even have smoked sea salt. So, you know, you can do it, whichever kind of salt you have handy. What? They're laughing, so I don't know. I think I've said something funny. Okay, so we're going to have our salt handy. And then the other thing I asked you to have are some crayons. And so get your crayons handy. And some plastic wrap. Doesn't matter what kind, but that kind of stuff you use to cover your dinner after you've cooked or your leftover food. So we've got all that handy. So we're going to start over here, and remember our wet on wet technique. We're going to wet that one side right here, okay? Just go ahead and go over it. And you remember we want it to be shiny but not standing water, okay? How's everyone doing?
There are some questions. What do we do if we don't have saran wrap on hand?
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Just continue on, and I'm going to show you those things so you can play with them later. So, no worries at all. Now, normally when you're painting and you're wetting your paper this much, you would tape your paper to a surface. But today, because we're moving around, I didn't worry about it. I want you to color a blue and get a blue all wet. And I want you to start at the top with your color, and I want you to gradient that color down, okay? I want you to stay with these horizontal strokes and keep moving your color down, okay? Now, I'm not worried about going all the way to my edges, just for the purpose here. Watercolor is really the best when you can take it and you can layer it on top of each other, because that's when you get these beautiful layers of transparency. So, while you have it like that, if you don't have saran wrap, don't worry. Wax paper also works, but don't worry, just leave it like that. If you do have saran wrap, take your saran wrap and just smush it right on there. Can you see that on camera? What that looks like? There's no right or wrong way to do this, honestly. You just smush it on there, and you get kind of this. Can you see that closer if I hold it closer? What that looks like? Now the best part is we just let that sit. We're just going to leave it just like that. So, is everyone ready to move on to the second one? What I want you to do, and I'm going to try and do this upside down, is we're going to draw a series of boxes on the bottom. So any color crayon, it does not matter. I'm drawing upside down for y'all. So.
If at this time you don't have a crayon, what is another good option to use?
Okay, so why don't you watch, and then I'll show you how to use paint to put that in right now. Don't worry if you don't have crayons, but I'm going to color in. Do other people have crayons? I'm going to make
Some people do. Some people are asking for just a little bit lower on the crayon portion.
Okay. Let me talk to you about why we would use crayons. Crayons are made of wax. So anything that has wax in it, if you know, crayons are something most people have around their homes. If you had oil pastels, you could use oil pastels. If you didn't, you can use anything that has wax in it. So actually, if you have like a candlestick, I don't have any candlesticks in my house, but if people had candlesticks, you can actually use the edge of a candle. Yeah, but you'd have to have a stick. You have to be able to write with it. So, you know, if you had a candle that had like a candlestick, you know, kind of like the old-timey kind that people would go upstairs with, you know, in the movies.
On the candle tray.
Yes, on the little thing.
Some people are requesting if you could slow down a little bit.
Yes, all I'm doing is I'm making a little cityscape is what I'm doing. So take your time, play all you want, but the reason we're using the crayons, like I said, it was made of wax, because wax and water don't work. This is what is called a resist. The water will not stick anywhere there's wax. So anywhere you use watercolor, because most of it is made up of water, it won't stick. So any designs you put on here, you can put stripes, you can make it look any way you want. This is a fun one to repeat afterwards. This does not matter what this looks like. So we'll put a big box. You can make yours look just like that. You can, remember we did houses yesterday? You can give yourself a little top right there. Yeah, a little rooftop. Maybe this one has some chimneys. It's like little smokestacks. Okay, how's everyone doing on their crayons? This is also, you can add to this on top of your watercolor. It just won't resist. So are we feeling good? We can jump in. So what we're going to do is, once you get some kind of little cityscape, we're going to come on and we're going to wet that again, just like we did all over. Now you'll notice when your brush goes on top of the wax, you can kind of feel it resist already. You can feel it pull. So let me see, I have a little bit extra water on there, so I'm going to make sure I work it all around. Okay, and then I'm going to come in with a purple, and I'm going to do the same thing from the top. Now you notice you work from the top down. And then I'm going to get a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to work from the bottom up. And I'm going to blend those together. Okay, offload my brush a little bit, and then you can just kind of work on that. Add a little darker. How are we doing? Okay, so I will let you, I've got that on there so you can see it. Now, let me add a little bit more, and we're going to blend that yellow in. How's everyone doing? Now, while you're doing that, I'm going to show you something with two different things. If you have, the other item I had mentioned on the list was a Q-tip. If you don't have a Q-tip, don't worry, just watch. But anything that is absorbent, so you could take the paper towel and you could make a little tip, but we're going to absorb some of that water. Watch what happens when I place it down. See how that starts to absorb? And make those little, and see if I just have this, I'm going to wind it into a little point right there. Okay. Now, while y'all do that, I'm going to sprinkle on some rice. And I'm just going to let that sit, okay? If you don't have rice, rice, baby. If you don't have rice, don't worry about it. You can watch that. You can also use, the rice and the salt do the same thing. The rice just does it very subtly. So I'm going to let everyone catch up on that, and so keep going, and then we're going to go to our third panel. But what you've done right here is we've done a technique that every single technique with watercolor involves removing or resisting. Removing or resisting or layering on top. The other thing with watercolor is anywhere you want to have the white, you're utilizing the back surface of your paper. So keep going. And we're going to let everybody kind of come along on their cityscape right there and do their thing. Okay. And then we're going to get to our next one. Okay. So are we ready for this? So what we're going to do right here is I'm going to take a light color on my crayon and I'm going to color in down here. Now, does anyone, if you were able to watch the video yesterday, you remember we talked about a horizon line. That's kind of what we're putting in right here, because we're going to make a little sunset as we go. Okay? And we're going to do basically what we did over here, but we're going to do it with an extra color as we're going to mix in. So I'm going to start with my purple or my blue. Actually, I'm going to start with blue because that'll be a little bit easier next to the purple, so it won't get, and I'm going to, now what did I not do this time? I did not wet the paper. So now we're putting on a wash without wetting the paper. So when I want it to get here, I'm just adding the water. So this one we wet the paper ahead of time. This one we wet the paper ahead of time. And this one we just went ahead and painted right on there. So let me start with my yellow down at the bottom. And I'm going to come up. And again, I didn't wet the paper. And I'm just going to come up a little bit above my horizon line. Now what colors, what might we like to see? We're going to bring our yellow in here now. And then a little red down here. And then guess what's going to go in between? Now don't worry, I know I'm going very fast on this, but I'm going to let you follow this and catch up. And we also always post the videos afterwards to Facebook and right after we stop. So if you need to rewind it, it'll go on live. After the live feed, it'll go straight on. And then what will happen is we also, if for some reason you have somebody that doesn't do Facebook, we're posting them to my YouTube channel, which is Kisa Hausman, which we'll put that on there because my first name is Norwegian and it's spelled with a silent J, so it doesn't come out just off the top of the head sometimes. So, is everyone feeling like you've got a little bit of a rainbow effect right here? While I'm waiting over here, for those of you that didn't have crayon, you always can paint in this cityscape at any time. You can add color down here. So when it's completely dry, you could go through and add that fun little element. Okay. So we're going to get to one more right here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to come back through with that blue and I'm going to darken that up one more time. Okay? So this time, remember I didn't put the water down first. I want you to finish this because mine's going to be drier than yours is. I'm going to put a little water down first and then I'm going to come around with a darker blue. And I'm going to bring that down all the way over all my colors. I'm going to blend them in together. Okay, getting that little. Remember I told you about the paper rounding if you don't tape it off. But for our purposes, we are not taping today. So I'm blending that all the way down. Did you see how I layered it on top? And now is the time I can sprinkle on the salt. I love using the salt. Now, how does the salt and the rice work? You keep on painting while I'm talking. The salt and the rice absorb water. So if there's water on the paper, they absorb the water. Well, with the water, they'll pick up the pigment. So what happens is you end up picking up pigment, which then leaves little lighter flecks. It will happen also with the rice. Here's the hard part. We have to wait until this completely dries before we can knock that rice off. And so you're going to have to finish adding all the other little details. In the meanwhile, let me check my paper. Oh, we're still a little wet. We can add a little bit of a sunset down here and get that to be fun and some mountains. So I'm going to let that dry. How's everyone doing? Are you getting your 3 with your gradients and your rice and your plastic wrap and your salt and your cityscape and all those good things? We doing okay? So what you can do is you can end up putting in a little bit of a sunrise down here on our horizon line while it's still I think I just wanted to be the sun because it's still raining here where we are. Is it raining where you are?
In replacement for crayon wax, can you use birthday candles?
Oh, birthday candles are perfect. Ooh, who was that brilliant person?
Let's see. You've actually had a couple people ask about birthday candles.
Oh, do we have names? I'd like to give them credit. Excellent idea. I forgot about birthday candles. Okay, so if you have a birthday candle, it'll look very similar to this. You can also use it to write on. The neat thing is because the birthday candle will be just clear wax, not colored wax, you'll actually see, it'll look like you see the surface of the paper. I think I have some white crayons just for anybody that wants to see. It will end up looking like this. I'll show you what so see how you can't tell where that wax is? But it's almost like a secret message, isn't it? So that's a really, yeah, you could spend time writing secret messages and you had to find them with watercolor. So this is a great activity, but you can already tell, can you tell where the salt is absorbing? See the salt absorbing the water right there? And this may not be completely dry, so leave yours on, but I'm going to pull mine off. And I want you to see this. It turns into a stained glass pattern, almost. Now, what this is great for is you could make an underwater scene right here. You could turn this into something that's outer space. You could just have a lot of fun with this. But I think, so now we just let this all dry. And then when it's all dry, you can knock rice off and knock salt off and maybe throw a little over my shoulder. And go ahead and lift it up, Keaton, and I'll talk to everyone about. So thank you so much. That's going to conclude just our introduction to watercolor today. I hope that you've learned a lot. I hope that you, I love you sending in suggestions like birthday candles. That's what this is all about. While we're all at home and we're discovering new things, then it's thinking outside of the box. And whoever sent those in, Talia will give you a big shout out. But that's the kind of, you are looking like an artist. You are looking for those details and for different ways to do things. So I'm super proud of you. Tomorrow, we're going to take what we've learned today. Remember, we learned washes and big words like gradients and transparency and things like that. And we're going to put those together and we're going to make birds tomorrow. So we're going to be drawing birds. and then using our watercolor to paint them. The other thing is tomorrow I will post our lessons for next week. We're all out of school, so this is the perfect time to learn art at home with your family. And so I have lots of great stuff for next week. And I'll get those posted. We'll use a lot of the similar supplies so that you can find them around your house. If you do have any questions about specifics, I can let you know. And with that note, I think we'll sign off for the day. And just remember, my favorite quote is by Philip James Bailey. Art is man's nature. Nature is God's art. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.